Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsal, and I love it when we have a repeat guest because they were that good. We brought him back again. So we know we're in for a good conversation. There are no surprises. Actually, there could be surprises, but hopefully positive ones. Really excited for our conversation today. Taylor Darcy is a rock star in what he does. We're going to introduce him in just a moment, but just to refresh your memory, episode 330 here on the Profit with Law podcast, How to Reach Your Audience and Build a Culture of Trust with Taylor Darcy, was the last time that he was on the show. I invite you to check it out at profitwithlaw.com/330. profitwithlaw.com/330. If you want to get a leg up on who Taylor is and that conversation that we had, it was a great convo. Definitely go back and listen to that in our archives. You can also find it in your podcast player by just searching for it as well. So Taylor is the owner of Think Legal PC, graduate of California Western School of Law and a California licensed attorney. He serves as the chairperson on the board of directors for Access to Independence and is an adjunct professor for Southwestern College. Taylor has a fantastic wife, 4 beautiful daughters, and a handsome son. Taylor, remind me, ages of your kids? What's the range?
My oldest is 8 and my youngest is almost 11 months.
Wow. 5 kids, 8 and under.
Yeah.
You are, I mean, I have 3 from a first marriage and then 3 with my wife now. But because my 3 from the first marriage are grown, 2 of them are engaged to be married. We're making 2 weddings coming up. But they're all, and Mimi, who's the oldest, works here at the company. She's the producer of this show. So I kind of view it separately. Like I don't think of it as, I have 6 kids. Yeah. It's kind of like I have 3 and then I have 3 now, right. Which is weird, but that's just because, I don't need to be actively parenting day to day for my adult children. So I kind of think of it as like 3. And my wife and I are expecting number 4 together. So that would make 7 for me. But I mean, 4 with my oldest being 7, so he'll be turning 8 right around the time that number 4 comes around. I know what we have with 3 plus 1 on the way, 5, 8, 8 and below. That's a lot of work. So hats off to you and your what was the official description? Your fantastic wife. Hats off to you guys for taking this on and rearing the next generation almost single-handedly there. But it's a great place for us to start our conversation. And I'm skipping the part where you tell us about yourself. Folks can go back and listen to episode 330 for that. I'm just going to jump right into a conversation. You and I decided that we were going to talk about planning today, and I'm very passionate when it comes to planning because ultimately, when I sit down with clients, probably 90 to 95% of them, if not greater, a number, have never sat down and actually written down how they make money in their law firm.
Right.
And we spend the first 90 days working together. We're trying to compact it into 6 weeks, but we spend the first 90 days working together, creating the plan that's going to create the eventual future result that they want. And the reason why I'm jumping straight into this is because with 5 kids, you can't allow your business to happen to you, right? No. Like you have to be able to surround your business around the realities of your life, which is, in the morning, your house is a zoo, getting everybody off to school and lunch is made and bags packed and breakfast fed and all of that. Then the hustle and bustle wears off. You get them off to school and now you could jump into your day. But come 3, 4, 5 o'clock, they're all starting to trickle home from school and you're back in the zoo. Right. So, really figuring out how to run a successful business within the confines of that limited time frame that's allowed because of those young children at home really lends itself to needing to know what you're doing in order to be successful. So what are your thoughts on this? Is the reason that you that you consider yourself an authority on planning have something to do with your circumstances that, surrounding the way that you need to run your life and your business.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, you have to kind of be realistic about your plans. That doesn't mean that you can't set big goals and big dreams and all that other stuff, but you have to make allowances for the people and the situation of your life, right? If you try to fit, if you're a single person, that gives you a lot of carte blanche opportunity to do what you want to do with it. But if you're married or you have a family or something that you have other obligations, you need to put that in as a major factor, right? Like, so maybe you're working throughout the day a little bit, but then at night when they go to bed, you're finishing up the things that you couldn't get done while they're here, right? So you got to be willing to acknowledge that life exists outside of law. And beginning, I think it was Stephen R. Covey that said it best when he said, beginning with the end in mind, right? Like, what is your goal? Why are you practicing law? Is it to make a living or is it practice law? And I'm not, there is no judgment here. You pick whatever one works for you. But if you're not looking at the end result of, I want to be able to spend time with my family, then you're going to spend more time being frustrated because you're not being true to yourself, right? Like that's really what planning is about. It's about saying yes to the things that are important and no to the things that aren't important. And that means, like, for instance, when you're planning, focus on either one area of law or two areas of law that complement each other, that don't conflict, obviously, but more to the point, something that you can work with to create the life that you're looking for rather than what happens to you, right? Because you can't control, like, for instance, my 4-year-old, right? When she's in a mood and she throws a temper tantrum, I can't control that, but I can control how I react to that. And I can know that, maybe the afternoon isn't the best time, when she's usually in that, moody phase, isn't the best time to work, right? Because she's going to need me to take care of her or my wife or whoever, right? So planning around your life rather than trying to force your life to plan into it. It's the old round peg in a square hole, so to speak. You need to fit your law practice to your life, not you to your law practice. Because otherwise, if you're miserable in the process, you're not going to deliver the quality of results that you want to. You're not going to be the attorney that you want to, and you're not going to be the person that you want to. Single, married, whatever, living on someone's couch. I don't care what it is, whatever you want to do. You can't do that if you are miserable. So you need to figure out a way to make law work in the context of your life.
I love that you that you focused initially on just, hey, focus on one practice area, maybe two that complement each other. We actually have if we have to dust off the archives here, we have an episode back from 2019. So August 13th, 2019, we had episode 29. You can find it, folks, at profitwithlaw.com/029, called Why Choosing a Niche Will Skyrocket Your Firm. And in that episode, I really lay out the argument. I don't want to rehash it here, but I really lay out the argument of all of the reasons why really focusing on one practice area is the key to success in your business. And I encourage you to go listen to that, because when we're approaching this conversation of planning and we're talking about the purpose of it, ultimately the purpose of creating a plan is to really make sure that you stay on track with the actions you take. Right. And what happens is when I work with law firm owners, and I'm helping them figure out, why are they struggling to find success, and what is the path to success. Ultimately, what we find is that they're taking action based on whatever feels right at the moment.
Yeah.
And when you're running your business with a, off the cuff action plan, you never get traction in any one thing.
Right.
Everything is just, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And what's the old saying? Like you're a jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Yeah.
It kind of plays into this as well. Like if you're trying to be the salesman in the morning, the marketer in the afternoon, the lawyer in the evening, and the and the receptionist and the next day, like, and there isn't a plan around that, what ends up happening is that you never get the traction, you never get the inroad that you need to make that progress. And what we do is we've discovered that if you have focused intensity on what you're doing, if you approach something with knowing this is the most important thing for me to execute on and complete right now, that's more likely to see that to completion. And then you can complete a marketing project from beginning to end. You can complete a revamp of your sales process from beginning to end. And that's going to make your business tick and move that much faster. So Taylor, when you approach planning, give me the broad strokes of how you go about doing that. You mentioned, hey, you got to keep it realistic, but it's okay. But still, it's okay to have lofty goals. So talk to me about what that looks like, beginning with the end in mind. How do you set what the end looks like, and then how do you work your way backwards to actually create a plan?
Sure. So I kind of wanted to touch a little bit more on the niche, because I just had a thought about that. Also, if you're focused on one practice area or one niche within a practice area, the efficiency that you can do with that practice area far exceeds if you're trying to do lots of different practice areas, lots of different niches, right? Because you can't get the economy that goes with the knowledge, right? Like, you're having to keep learning and relearning and whatnot. So I wanted to just touch on that real quick, is that you can't get efficient at something that if you keep changing with the wind. If there's a new shiny object syndrome when it comes to practice area, and you're chasing another car like a dog would, right? Then you're going to miss out on being able to get fast enough to catch a car, right? Because you're never going to get there if you keep on moving one direction or another. So I just wanted to touch on that. But as far as beginning with
Taylor, I want to just, since you already brought that up, I just want to hone in on one more key nuance, and that is that you keep saying the word "you," and I want to just bring to our audience's attention that this becomes an exponentially larger problem when you're trying to have a team behind you. Yeah. Because you cannot train people on how to do something and how to do it well if every 5 minutes you're changing what they need to do. Yeah. So if you want to build a law firm where you have supports in place to help you perform your job and to help you grow and serve more clients over time, those people need to have systems and processes behind what they do. And it's almost impossible to do that if every time that you create a system or process, you start something new. And therefore that process is now obsolete. We're on to the next thing. So really good point. Yeah. That you, and you're going to frustrate the heck out of your support staff, right? Because just when they feel comfortable knowing what they're going to do, and you change it on them because, so-and-so got $100 million settlement on this case, and I want to chase after those same clients. And it's like, okay, great. But that's a one in a, that's a one, most settlements don't go for that, right? So if you're chasing something new, your support staff, you're going to have a high turnover in your support staff too. That's the other thing. It's going to cost you more money that way, because people are going to get frustrated with you changing it. And you might be the best boss in the world, but people like consistency, right? People like knowing that they're going to go to work in the morning and do their job and come home and they feel like they've done their job well. So if you're constantly changing, now that doesn't mean you can't plan for changes, right? That doesn't mean that you can't, start a practice area, see it through, get it fully developed, and then say, okay, now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to go towards this practice area, and that's okay. If you're planning it, right? It's the difference between the shiny object syndrome and planning for what you're doing, right? If you're like, oh, in 2 years, I want to move out or not move out, but I want to get into personal injury. And so I'm going to start developing the things that I want to do with it now, even though I'm in civil litigation, right? Those are little complementary areas. Civil litigation is more cash up front. Personal injury is more cash later, essentially. So those are complementary areas. You can start developing your PI
practice a little by little, start, getting its feelers, rather than trying to go into estate planning when you do civil litigation. And I'm not saying you can't, but if you're jumping from one to the other, you'll never get that traction that we're talking about. And I think that's the key. That it's not that you can't eventually get there. It's that you shouldn't try to do things both at once. And that's the real issue. As far as beginning with the end in mind, what kind of life do you want, right? Like, that's really what we're talking about. Do you want to live your life on the road in a travel RV? Do you want to live your life traveling from one place to another? And so you don't really want to have a physical, more, office. What does that look like? What does your life look like? What is it that your goals are? So you start with that part first, right? That's where I wanted to just say, because that looks very different than someone that wants to have a law firm in a downtown high rise next to the courthouse, right? Those two are very different looks. They take very different money and they take very different skills to get there. And so that's why you've got to start with that end in mind, because neither one is right or wrong. It's only what's right for you, right? Like, I don't have a desire to have an office downtown next to the courthouse. I'm not in court. I don't care about court. Court can do its own thing. So what does that look like? And then you need to say, okay, well, this is where researching, okay, what is a downtown office cost, right? Like, is it $10 a square foot? Is it $60 a square foot? What is the cost of that? And then start planning these things, baking a budget based on that. Start with your budget and then say, okay, what does that mean for me as far as my clients are concerned? How many clients do I need per year to get to this level? Okay. And then you're going to start looking at it. Okay, well, how many intakes am I making? Okay. How many of those actually turn into clients? Okay. You need to start looking at these hard numbers and not fudging it. That's the other thing that I see a lot of attorneys doing, is they're just kind of, I think I get, maybe I get. And they're not really tracking their numbers. They're not looking at these solid numbers and saying, okay, what is it why did this person not hire me? Right? Like, why were they just kicking tires, which happens a lot. Everybody that's ever been an attorney knows that there's a lot of tire kickers out there. So what can you do to cut down on the tire kickers so that you have a higher close rate? So then you break it down to, what are you doing monthly? What are you doing weekly? What are you doing daily? What does that mean? What is your marketing budget look like, right? Like, what is your client cost acquisition? All of these things need to go into your planning and say, okay, if you can get to your travel lifestyle probably a bit quicker than the law firm next to the courthouse lifestyle, simply because that doesn't cost as much to get there. You don't need rent. You don't need, you can do it with fewer clients. You can charge more because or you can charge less, I should say, if you want to. You just have to plan for these things. You have to look at these end results and go, okay, this is what I need to live the life that I want to have. And if that means, you need to close a client a day, then how many clients do you need to have being looked at each day for that to be? So if you're closing 1 out of 5, so 20%, that's not a bad number, not a great number, but if you're closing 20%, then you're looking at, okay, so I need 5 clients phone calls a day. I need my intake specialist to be closing 1 out of those 5. If you're, depending on your average retainer, average case value, that type of thing. The other thing that is very important on this one, are you using flat fees? Flat fees create a predictable source of revenue, which is a whole lot better than doing hourly and then having to worry about realizing your rate, right? Like, because a lot of law firms will charge an hourly rate absurd, and then their realization rate is much lower because of that. And so then you're like, okay, well, now I have to pad that even further, right? Because now I'm not closing it. I'm not making, and I'm just using a number here. I'm not making 300 an hour. I'm only making 150, right? So flat fees give you, I'm a big fan of flat fees, by the way, in case you couldn't tell.
Couldn't tell.
Yeah. Flat fees give you predictable income that I can't tell you how many clients have hired me over other people because I could give them a flat fee up front. Now, that doesn't mean I'm perfect. Have there been times when I've had to eat some, or it's taken me longer to solve the problem that it, yes, absolutely. But what I did is I made that as a learning experience, and I adjusted my fee for next time. And then the next time it works, and I found the right price, right? Like, don't think just because you might have lost a little on the one flat fee, which happens, right? But if it's not a significant amount, then don't worry about it. You don't even need to raise your rate, because there'll be other cases or other matters that you're going to handle that your flat fee might seem high, right? But you're going to average it out to make up for that in a time basis, but you're not going to have the stress of the billable hour that is actually detrimental to client relationships, in my opinion. And so
Taylor, that you keep prompting me for dusting off some age-old episodes here. So cool. I just want to throw this out there for our audience. We have an episode 26 released in July of 2019, so almost 3 years ago. Almost 4 years ago, I should say. The Death of the Billable Hour, episode 26. It's can be found at profitwithlaw.com/026. I think you're getting a theme. Any episode number, just profitwithlaw.com/that episode number, and you'll be able to find it. So we have a great episode where we talked about that, but that episode was released before the Clio Legal Trends survey that took place in 2021, I believe it was. And the Clio Legal Trends survey, in that survey, basically talked about this concept of the fact that lawyers discount their rate. And that's really what Taylor was talking about, that you don't actually realize the billable rate that you're advertising. So you say my rate is $300 an hour, but when you go through the billing cycle, you look at the work that was done and you say, well, this shouldn't have taken 4 hours. It should have taken 2 hours. So you discount it to 2 hours. You just gave a 50% discount on what actually happened. Then you send it out to the client. The client calls back and says, hey, this is higher than I thought, or I can't afford this, or why did I get billed for 2 hours when we spent an hour talking about my kids in college? And they further push for a discount on the invoice, and or they don't pay it right away. You did a poor job with retainer replenishment. Now you're chasing after an invoice that's uncollectible, and you start to discount it just to be able to collect those funds.
Yep.
By the time you turn around, your hourly rate ends up being discounted, whatever that percentage is, 50%, 60%, 30%. It's different for everybody, but anybody who's doing hourly billing is probably doing this in some way, shape, or form. And the argument that they made in the legal trend survey was basically, if you eliminate the discounting and just recognize what your actual collection rate is, and said that was your hourly rate instead, you would get way more clients, because the barrier to entry is lower. So Instead of telling people my rate is $300 an hour, you told them your rate was $150 an hour, but you didn't give any discounts during the billing process. You would get a lot more clients up front, because the barrier to entry is half. Right. And comparing you to a competition, whatever things that they're thinking about during their decision to work with you. So by having this model of billing and then discounting, you're really hurting yourself in the process on the front end more than you realize. I brought this up as an aside. It's really a sidebar from the main conversation that we're having. And that is that, you basically highlighted that, look, you got to start at the beginning with knowing what kind of firm you're looking to build. Is it remote? Is it in person? Is it downtown? And the interesting thing is we started off talking about, choosing a niche and sticking with it, or choosing a practice area and sticking with it. And then you shared that, look, you need to know what kind of firm you're building. Guess what? The kind of firm also dictates whether it fits with the practice area you want. Right. So if you want to be traveling and have a remote practice, but you want to do criminal law, those two don't go together. No, because you got to show up in court for your clients, right?
Yep.
At the same time, if you want to do trademarks or estate planning or something like that, where you basically can do it all remote. You can have a national footprint. It's not limited to the state that you're in. Maybe estate planning is, maybe you need to be
estate planning is
barred in that state, but some of the federal level stuff like trademarks and IP is a lot more. You can expand that easier. Regardless, whatever the case is, those types of businesses are much more apt to be able to be transportable, and you need to look at that in the big picture. But the other thing that you didn't talk about and is financial goals when you're beginning with the end in mind. And I'd like you to weigh in, Taylor, on your thoughts about this. But I think there's a difference between the goal that you're aiming for and the measurement of achievement.
Sure.
And this is something I'm really careful about with my clients. So tell me about how you look at this in the planning process, and then when you're looking at your performance, are you looking at the goal that you set to indicate whether your performance is good or not?
I think there needs to be a preface, because I go back to the discounting your rate. I think there's a necessary discussion that needs to happen about the psychology of money, right? There's a book by Jen Sincero. She talks about you're a badass at making money. And so the reason why I bring that up is because I think people's relationships with money matter as much or more than the dollars and cents that actually get made when it comes to money, because people discount their rates because they don't feel like they're entitled to the money that they were that this is what's in a client engagement agreement, right? And so the other person saying, well, I can't afford that. Well, you knew what my rate was when I brought you on, right? It's not a surprise. So the reason why I also say this, as far as the planning process is concerned, you can make millions and millions of dollars if you want to. But if you don't have your mind right when it comes to how you're making that millions, then you'll be much like the people that win the lottery that lose all their money because they don't feel like they earned it, right? And people are like, oh, you won the lottery, right? But the problem is not everybody bought the ticket. Not everybody put the numbers in. And so I want the listeners to start talking about the psychology of money, and how money affects their lives, the limiting beliefs that go with that. So I wanted to say that before we get to the planning part. So that really comes down to dollars and cents, right? Like what type of revenue do you want to have? What does that mean for you as far as salary is concerned? What does it mean for you as far as savings is concerned? And start walking that backwards, right? Like if you want to make $1 million a year and you need to have 200 clients for a year in order for it to make that happen. And I don't know individual practice area wise. I'm just saying that's a number. So if what's 200 times divided by a million, I don't have a calculator handy, but I think that's about 5,000 a client. Does that sound about right? Or is that, no, that's not right. Anyway, point is that if you are shooting for these goals, then you need to start with that $1 million or that $500,000, whatever number that you're looking at, and start moving that backwards, right? Like, what does that mean each month? And then make that plan as part of your process. Start with that and say, okay, here's your life that you want. Here's the revenue that I want. Here's what I want type of lifestyle outside of the law that I want, right? Because there's the internal and an external. And you need to make sure those are copacetic with each other, right? You need to make sure that you're planning for your life out of law as well as your life in law. That just struck a funny chord, life in law. Sorry. Anyway, and then
hey, our brand is profit with law, right? So it's kind of along those lines.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that kind of like begins the thought process for people, is that if your dream client, okay, pays $10K, but your average client is only paying $2K, then you obviously can't bank on your $10K client, right? Like that's just not a fair. That's your dream client. That's great, and I'm not saying you shouldn't shoot for those dream clients. But if your dream client isn't your average client, then you need to work with your average client numbers rather than your dream client, because then otherwise you're setting yourself up for this failure of mind. Well, I didn't reach my goal. Well, what was your goal based on? Was it based on your dream, your once a year client, or your everyday client, right? Plan for your
Yeah,
worst and hope for the best.
yeah, absolutely. But one thing that you can do is if you have any sort of metrics to determine what the ratio is, like for every 10 basic clients I bring in, I find one dream client, then you could plan for that. You could say that for every 10 clients we bring in, that's 20,000. We're going to get one $10,000 client. So for every 11 clients that we have, we generate 30,000 in revenue, and kind of arrive at the quantity of clients needed from there. One thing that's interesting is that your examples were all revenue based, and this is what I find a lot of people focus on is what is the revenue number that I need, but they pick that number out of a hat. Right. Like they just oh, 1 million sounds great. Right. Like it rolls off the tongue easy. Right. It sounds like if there was a lotto ticket with 1 million, I would buy it. But if it was 900,000, I probably wouldn't. Right. Like, so we generate this revenue number just out by picking it out of our hat. What I do with my clients is the first thing that we do is we evaluate your personal financial need. And then we use industry standards, not industry standards, my standards for profitability, right?
Right.
So if we assume that you can be generating a 40% profit margin on your business and you have a need to bring in 500,000 in personal income from your business, then we need to figure out, okay, what is the tax liability on 500,000? And then if we know that we add that plus your tax liability together, we know your profit margin, we can back into what your revenue needs to be. And for 500,000 in personal income, it's probably closer to 1.5 to 2 million in revenue that you need. And this surprises people a lot because they're like, okay, I'm thinking about this top line number, especially if you're early on in business. It sometimes takes a while for you to realize that every dollar coming in doesn't actually go to you. As a matter of fact, a lot of business owners are not really good at this at all. And every dollar that comes in doesn't go to them at all. And you spend it all you're always investing in the next thing, never taking anything home. And then you got to question how sustainable is that. So when you're looking at that number goal, I want you to always look at what is your personal financial need, and there's a difference between what do I need versus what do I want. So you got to differentiate that as well, and perhaps you attack the need first, and when you've achieved that, then you can go after the want. But then the next thing is understanding that financial goals they're the beacon, right? Like they're the thing you're aiming for. But along the way, you're going to veer off course. You have to course correct. If you don't do a good job with course correcting, you're going to get further off course. The age old example that's given is a plane leaves at LAX headed for New York, and what's happening is it's not flying in a straight line. It's actually constantly being pushed in different directions by the various forces up there, gravity and winds. And the autopilot system or the manual pilot, either one, is constantly adjusting to move the plane back to where it needs to be. So if you actually drew it out, it would be a tiny little, completely zigzag line that the plane is flying. If those corrections are not made, what would happen is that an airplane headed initially for New York would end up probably in Miami or Cuba by the time it lands, right? Because it goes so far off course. We, in running our business, have the same thing. But so because of that, we can't necessarily judge by the financial end result, because we don't control the actual end result. We only control the action we're taking on the way to getting there. So we use the financial end result to be the thing that helps us create the plan of what is the plan to get there. The reality is we don't know if that plan is going to work. We're just guessing, but we're taking an educated guess. We're throwing some mud at the wall. We're saying, okay, we think that this is going to help us get there. We made some assumptions based on, the numbers you were talking about, right? Like how many clients do I need? What's it going to cost me to get those clients? Based on those assumptions, we have a plan of action. The only thing we can control is the action we take. So when we're measuring ourselves, and we do 90 days, I don't know how you do it, Taylor, but we measure every 90 days, right? Like we only create projects that are 90 days long.
Right.
So at the end of the 90 days, we can look back and say, did we complete this project we set out to do? Right? Did we take the action that we said we were going to take? Ultimately, if we didn't achieve our financial result, that doesn't mean whether we were successful or not.
Right.
The success has to be gauged on us doing what we said we were going to do, because really that's the problem when it comes to law firm ownership, or any business ownership for that matter, is the 90% of the time you're not successful, not because you didn't have the right goal, but because you didn't take the action that you knew you needed to take. And there's a million reasons why we don't. But ultimately, if you continue to take the action, you will get there eventually. And that's really what the whole point of planning is, right? The whole point of planning is creating this action plan so that you're more likely to achieve the goal that you want, and get to where you want to go.
And I just wanted to kind of add to it. I think we need to normalize course corrections. I think people don't, they're looking at their life and going, oh, I want a straight line. Well, if that's not normal, then why are we expecting it, right? And so coming back and saying, all right, so you made a choice this week, make a different choice next week, right? Like normalizing course corrections and saying that's acceptable. That's the point, because there are forces that are beyond our control. We work in human world. That's why I put in my retainer agreements. I can't guarantee an outcome on something, because I know darn well there are too many variables that you can't plan for. I'm not producing a product. I'm producing a service. And so if you acknowledge the human in it, then you're going to recognize that course corrections are normal, acceptable, and should embrace, because who knows what's going to happen. Maybe the course that you end up at eventually, right, is going to have more value to you than the course you would have been in if you would have tried to stick to something that wasn't going to work in the first place. Right. So I always talk about on my podcast, Tactical Startup, haven't done an episode for a while, but anyway, about, being flexible, right? Being fixed on your goals, but flexible on how you get there. Because if as a solo, or even, a small firm, your greatest strength is your ability to change with what happens. Bigger firms have a harder time doing that because there's too many people involved. There's too many, turning around the Titanic versus turning around a speedboat, right? So use what works for you rather than trying to be the Titanic when you're a speedboat. Be the speedboat, right? Embrace that part of you until you can get where you want to be. If you want to be the Titanic, I don't recommend it, but anyway, if you want to be the Titanic or you want to be an ocean liner, then eventually you'll get there. But first, focus on being the best speedboat you can be to get as fast as you can be with it. And so that's just my other thing, is just flexibility, right? Like the waves are going to hit you. How are you going to respond? If something doesn't go your way, are you going to adapt, or are you just going to throw up your hands and say, no, never mind, forget it, I'm out, right? Like where's your mindset? Because the biggest difference between a successful business and an unsuccessful business is mindset, right? Money will come, but if you have a terrible mindset, people are still stuck in employee brain when they need to be stuck. They need to get their brains in business brain, and business brain handles problems very differently than employee brain does. So anyway.
Yeah, I love that. And you always throw in these little one-liners that are really like could be a whole episode just by themselves, like mindset. We really can focus an entire 30 to 60 minute conversation just on mindset alone. As a matter of fact, I know people who their entire business is supporting business owners with their mindset. So it's crazy how much we get in our own way in the process of doing this. And I love your speedboat versus ocean liner analogy, because we're always trying to figure out what is our advantage over the other guy, right? Like what is our advantage over somebody who's larger than us or has a better presence than us where we are right now? And really that is the biggest advantage you have, is that you could be nimble. You can adjust, you can make changes. That for you, it's simply a matter of making the decision in the morning. The change is done in the afternoon.
Exactly.
For other people, who have a much more established presence, they have a team, they have systems and processes. Like if they want to make a change, they need to revamp an entire system that's happening. It's going to take them months to do. So they might not even do it because of what's involved.
The cost.
So you really have your ability to be a scientist and to experiment with new things and different things is far greater than your competitions, and you really need to own that. The problem is, and going back to the mindset, the problem is that most law firm owners are going to get in their own way because we get stuck in this place of one of two things: either fear or making incorrect taking incorrect meaning off of a past action. So either you're afraid to take the next step because of the outcome or the negative outcome, which I have a whole rant I did on the podcast, and I don't know which episode it is. Maybe my team will find it, where I talk about this idea of fear and how silly fear really is, because the only way to prove that you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve is to not do it, which is what fear does for you, right? So it basically guarantees your failure if you give in to the fear. So the only way to actually succeed is overcome the fear. The other thing is when something doesn't work, often we look at it and we say, this didn't work, so therefore it doesn't work, I'm not going to do it again. And so many people come through the doors and like, okay, I already hired an attorney in the past and it didn't work out. It was a poor hire. It was a bad experience. I lost a lot of money. Took me 6 months to overcome that. I'm not doing it again.
Right.
And that's the wrong lesson to be learned, right? Like that the lesson to be learned might be to do a better job hiring the next time. But you can look around you for proof positive that you can hire an attorney and have a lot of success doing so, because every law firm out there that's not a solo has successfully done that. So I don't need to demonstrate to you it's possible. It's simply a matter of you getting past yourself and your own reservations or hesitation about your ability to succeed in this area.
Right.
I'm willing to dust off, stand up, and do it again. I look at, we talked about the age of our kids. I've got a 19-month-old. And I look at him, and even now, although he walks really well at this point, he runs. And when he runs, like I have to hold my breath because it looks like he's going to topple forward at any second, right? Like when little toddlers run, they run with complete disregard to the possibility of what would happen if they lost their balance along the way.
Yep.
And sometimes that happens, and he goes face forward and he plants his face on the floor, and there's some crying for a few moments. But guess what happens? He stands up and runs again.
Exactly.
And we need to act as toddlers in our business. We need to approach our business with complete disregard for what would happen if we do it again.
Right.
We can't be afraid of falling flat on our face. And really, like if we look at anybody who's successful and ask them, it took you 5 years, it took you 10 years to achieve this level of success. Is there any regret that you have? 90%, if not more, are going to tell you the only regret that I have is that I didn't do this sooner.
Yeah.
Right. Because along the way, if we really look at it, why did it take so long? It's because every time that I had a step back, I got lost for 6 to 12 months because of that setback.
Yeah.
And if I had just carried on and continued, imagine all of that time I could have truncated along the way. And that's why I really like the planning of your firm and really identifying, how do we succeed? How do we make money? Because when you have a written action plan, it's very easy to go back to the plan and say, okay, what's next?
Right.
What did we identify as being next? Taylor, I knew this would happen because we limit the length of these episodes. We batch them. I'm doing 6 interviews today that, when we're together. So we're gonna be out of time. We're gonna wrap it up very shortly. But there are some areas that we just didn't get to.
Yeah.
And one of them is this concept of, and a lot of my clients are doing this when I first start working with them, is stepping into something slowly because we don't know if it's going to work. So for example, I'll use marketing as an example. Somebody will invest, to them, $1,000 might be a lot to invest in marketing. So they'll invest $1,000 in marketing, and they're trying to win at SEO, but they're only willing to spend $1,000, or they're trying to win at PPC, but they're only willing to spend $1,000. But if we look at the big picture and we say, okay, in a healthy business, what percentage of your revenue should be spent on marketing?
Right.
For this conversation, let's just say it's 10%, right? Probably ultimately when you're large enough, you want to be closer to between 5 and 10%. But let's say it's 10%. If your financial goal is 500,000 in revenue, 10% of 500,000 is 50,000.
Right.
That's $4,000 a month.
Yep.
So if you want to have a $500,000 business, you have to be willing to invest $4,000 a month in your marketing.
Yep.
And if you're stepping into it with this little tiny budget saying, oh, I'm going to spend a little bit on marketing, I'm going to hope I'm going to get there, you're not going to get there, right?
Spray and spray. Yeah.
And that's why planning is so important, because it makes you put the numbers down, like write the numbers down on paper and look at it and say, does this make sense? Yeah. And when we start looking at it that way, all of a sudden it's a different question we start asking, right? Like all of a sudden I realize, okay, I need to spend $4,000 a month in marketing. So what's the real question?
Right.
How am I going to get that money?
Yep.
How long will it take to pay it off? How quickly can I get results? So now when we're having conversations with marketers and figuring out who we're going to go with, the conversation is different. Yeah. It's not how much should I spend. It's here's my budget.
Right.
I want to know from when I engage you, when are you going to start producing leads for me? Right. When, what is the quantity of leads I can expect to have, monthly, 6 months into our engagement with this kind of spend. Yeah. When you start asking those questions and you start validating your assumptions in your plan, and then you go with somebody with those clear numbers, metrics in mind, the vendor now has something to answer to. The vendor now knows what your expectation is, instead of, hey, here's $1,000, let's see what you can do with it. Right. Because so many people have horror stories when it comes to working with marketers, but I don't think it's the marketing agencies that suck. I think it's the business owners that are, look, there's plenty of marketing agencies out there that are not worth their weight.
That's all I was saying.
Like, I'm not endorsing marketing agencies across the board, but there are definitely good ones out there. Yeah. But if you as a business owner step into a relationship with a marketing agency and you don't have a clear understanding of what's required to achieve what you define as a level of success, and those metrics are not clear between both parties, right, then you're setting yourself up for a tenuous relationship, and it's completely your fault. Yeah. So, I really think that when it comes to planning, there's so much to it. It's not just what's my goal. It's the whole picture of where is the money going. Same thing with staffing, right? Like if I recognize that in order to deliver 500,000 in revenue, I actually need another attorney on staff. Like I can't personally do that much work. Right. Or I need to implement some sort of technology that's going to automate some things, or I need to have support staff that's going to do it. And I'll just plug for Get Staffed Up here, because if you're thinking about needing more staff, the very first place that I would turn to is Get Staffed Up. Go to profitwithlaw.com/Get Staffed Up. We have a $750 discount for you, but they bring in international workers, full-time workers at under $2,000 a month. And these people are rock stars when it comes to first getting your foot wet with hiring people and learning how to delegate and get things off your plate. You're gonna have to train them, but they can do a lot of the things that are keeping you busy, throughout the day, that really don't need to have you working on them. But again, when it comes to staffing, right? Like my formula, the general rule of thumb is about 40% of your revenue is going to be going to staff. When you're at 500,000 in revenue, that's what, $200,000? Yeah. Right. 250. I want to say. Yeah. No, it's 200. Right. 40% of 500 is 200,000. Right. Yeah. So if you're not investing in payroll to the tune of 200,000, how do you expect to get to 500,000 in revenue? Yeah. Right. You don't have the resources available to get there. And of course, it brings up a whole nother conversation. And that's why planning is so important, because now I can identify my cash needs to make the investment in my firm to be able to get to where I want. Now I can start figuring out, where does that money come from? But without that, we're always in reactionary mode. We're always saying, okay, I know I need to grow, but when I have this much revenue, I'll think about hiring somebody. And it's completely backwards from the way that it really needs to be. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we're going to close it out now. So Taylor, when I close out the show, I ask two things. Number one, what is one parting piece of advice, wisdom you want to leave with our audience? Number two, if somebody that's listening to this show wants to reach out to you, take the next step with you, learn more about what you do, get involved with your brand in some way, where do you want to send them?
Sure. First one is, I like to quote John C. Maxwell, who said, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn, right? Like every loss is an opportunity to learn. And if you take it from that perspective, you're going to win, right? Like there's nothing that even the worst circumstances can provide you with knowledge, and knowledge is power for moving forward with your business. As long as you're willing to accept it, get your ego out of it, keep your ego out of it, and just learn, right? That's the last thing I want to say about that. But as far as finding me, I'm everywhere, thinklegalpc.com. Think Legal PC on YouTube, you name it, I'm Think Legal PC. So you can reach me anywhere. Instagram, I'm on TikTok, no videos yet. I need to do that. But anyway, but I have a full YouTube channel addressing legal issues, management issues, that type of thing as well. So, check me out. And if you're wanting to get started with more information about the flat fees and all the other stuff, please reach out. I'd love to talk about ways to make your practice better. And you happier, right? We need more of that. We need more attorneys that are happy attorneys. So
awesome, Taylor. Thank you. Really appreciate you taking your time to be here today. This was a great conversation. A lot of really important points. Folks, if you're interested in working with me in the success of your law firm, definitely go to profitwithlaw.com/elite, profitwithlaw.com/elite. Start your journey there. And if this is your first time listening to the show, or you're not subscribed yet, make sure to hit that subscribe button in your podcast player so you get notified every time we release a new episode. We are here every single week on Thursday morning, bright and early for you, with a brand new guest. And we also have our YouTube channel now. So we invite you to go over there, profitwithlaw.com/YouTube, hit the subscribe button there. You get notified when we release new episodes and it's not just episodes, new videos there. We're also leaning heavily into shorts. So YouTube is putting a lot of their juice into these short videos. What my team is doing behind the scenes, they're hard at work at pulling out snippets from a ton of video content that we have over the years, from podcast episodes, law firm growth summit talks, workshops we've done, webinars we've done, and they're pulling out these little 30 to 90 second clips of value and turning them into YouTube shorts for you. So you definitely want to be subscribed to our channel, because you never know when you're going to get hit with that one dose of 90 seconds that's going to completely change your life in your law firm. And when that happens, make sure to not only comment on that video, but reach out to me. Let me know. I'd love to know that we helped you in that way. Take care. We'll see you all next week.